Does it work?
Now you can try now. Yeah.
Can you see the screen or?
Yes, we are.
Yes, we do.
Before we start, maybe I would very quickly say some words about this presentation because of the language situation. So, спасибо большое за приглашение на эту конференцию. И слайды нашей презентации разделены на две части. У нас английский и русский текст. И доклад наш будет на английском языке, но мы надеемся, что русский текст на слайдах сформулирован таким образом, что вы сможете следить за презентацией, просто читая его, и что не надо будет переводить. Но это посмотрим, как получится. Спасибо. Svenja, you may.
Okay. Our presentation will deal with the partial decipherment of the Unknown Kushan Script. My name is Svenja Bonmann. I will give you a short introduction to the topic, and I will present the first part of the decipherment. My colleagues Jakob Halfmann and Natalie Korobtsow will be speaking later on. So let's start with a short introduction detailing the linguistic, historical, and geographical context. Here you can see a map showing the find sites of the Unknown Kushan Script. As you can see, most inscriptions cluster in a territory that was known in ancient times as northern Bactria, situated between the Hisar Mountains and the Amudaya. I do not have that much time, so I will skip the detailed linguistic introduction. I want just to highlight that this vast territory was dominated by Iranian languages in antiquity. Here I should mention specifically Sogdian, Bactrian, and the Saka languages. Bactrian was spoken in Bactria, Sogdian a little bit to the north, and the Saka languages probably to the east. And all these languages will occur later in the presentation. So when you want to decipher an unknown script, an unknown writing system, what do? You start with, you try to gather the best available images of all inscriptions. You set up a catalog of characters. You classify character shapes. You search for diacritics. You sort out unrelated inscriptions that probably do not belong to the corpus. And finally, you perform a distributional analysis, which aims at detecting parallel sequences between different inscriptions. We did all this, and we observed that most inscriptions reflect one coherent writing system. This is just one system. There is a recurring set of characters. There is the same diacritic system. There are probably around 25, 26, 27 characters plus diacritics. The structure of the script is reminiscent of Kharoshthi or Brahmi, which means this is likely an alpha syllabary of the Indic type. The direction of writing of this unknown Kushan script is right to left, which means lines are aligned on the right, diacritics are added on the left of characters. You should read these inscriptions from the right to the left. In a general sense, if you want to decipher, the best case is provided if you have a bilingual or trilingual. This means texts in parallel scripts, which you can already read. In the case of the Unknown Kushan script, we probably have two such parallel texts, namely one's trilingual, namely that of Dashti Nawur, and one bilingual in the new finds from the Алмосީ. In both cases, we have a Bactrian parallel text, which shows the same elements, namely King of Kings and the name Wema Taktu. We have this in Dashti Nawur and in Алмосީ, and we started our decipherment with the working hypothesis that both elements would also be present in the unknown script parts in Dashti Nawur and Алмосީ, which means we would expect that King of Kings and Wema Taktu would occur in the unknown script parts. So I mentioned that we carried out a distributional analysis, and this distributional analysis led us to identify a parallel sequence between Dashti Nawur and Алмосީ. Алмосӣ is here depicted on the left and Dashti-Navur on the right, and we surmised that this shared parallel sequence might signify the royal name Wema Taktu. But since the Dashti-Navur inscription is rather long and the Алмосӣ inscription is rather short, we decided to focus first on Алмосީ because the shorter a bilingual is, the easier it is to determine phonetic values of characters. You can narrow down the options much easier than with a longer text. Okay, therefore we concentrated first our efforts on Алмосީ, and what we observed, apart from the parallel sequence with Dashti-Navur, was a repetition of 2 characters in line 1, here depicted on the top left. If you can see the you can see these repeated sequence of 2 signs. We have 2 times this sequence, and in between we have 2 other signs in the form of a snake or so, a snake-like symbol. We hypothesized that this might signify the King of Kings sequence, because King of Kings would have a repeated stem, a repeated base, king, 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 and in between we expected an extended version, namely the genitive plural ending, or perhaps the stem. This would match our expectations. Besides this repeated sequence in line 1, there was another repeated character in line 2, but this time only 1 character that is repeated, not a sequence of characters. And this would, in theory, perfectly match to the name Wema Taktu, Taktu with t. No? These are 2 times the t. This would match what we would expect. So the question then arose, what would an Iranian language give as a consonantal reading? If the language was an Iranian one, how many characters would you need to write down King of Kings in this language, in the consonantal writing system on abugida? Of course, you might be tempted to think about Persian, specifically Middle Persian. Middle Persian has Shahan Shah, King of Kings. This has 5 consonants, and this means if you want to write this down in a consonantal script or in an abugida, you would need 5 characters, not 6, as is attested in Алмосީ. This means Middle Persian is probably ruled out. Another possibility in an Iranian reading would be a form akin to Bactrian Shawanan Shao. The Bactrian form continues Proto-Iranian Shawananam Shawa. This would, in theory, fit or match to a 6-character sequence. We have a common element Shawa, Shawa, and we have 1 nasal for the stem and 1 nasal for the genitive plural ending. The only necessary assumption we must make is the reduction of the initial consonant cluster Proto-Iranian sh to a simpler sh, as in Bactrian. The Sogdian form still has the initial consonant cluster sh, but Bactrian has sh, and if the language recorded here in Алмосީ and Dashti-Navur has likewise simplified this cluster from sh to sh, we would only have 6 characters needed, namely 3 different ones, sh, w, and n, to depict King of Kings in this language. Let us test this idea. Let's see what comes out of it. If we substitute a simplified sibilant sh for this character, labial glide w for the other character, and the nasal for the snake-like symbol, we arrive at in line first, at the, line 1 at the top, sh w n n sh w, and in line 2 we can already read w at the beginning of the word, and we had already hypothesized that this repeated character might code for t of taktu. If this is correct, this must imply that in between these t, k stands. This would yield sh w n n sh w w ma whatever t k t n. And here I would like to hand over to my colleagues Jakob and Natalie.
Yes, I will share the screen again with my own presentation. Oh, okay, I can share my screen, it seems. Could you allow me to share the screen?
If you hold on, I'll do that.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank
Off you
you.
go.
Right. Yeah. Continuing where Svenja left off, we are now faced with the problem of three characters that we haven't assigned a value to yet, and which seem to be difficult to reconcile with the sequence Wema Taktu, but in fact, we may be able to reconcile it if we look at the way this name is represented in different languages. So the first part of the name is represented in Middle Indo-Aryan languages with a special diacritic on v, which somehow seems to indicate that this v is pronounced not in the usual way. In Bactrian, we have represented simply with a double O, but in the Middle Indo-Aryan version of the Dashti-Nawur inscription, in the third line, Fusman read a sequence Vhama Kushasa, which, judging from the photos, may at least in the first two syllables be corrected to Vhema, which would mean that here the name Vema is spelled with an onset V. And this accords well with the name of the later Kushan ruler Huvishka, who is generally considered, whose name is generally considered to be a diminutive of Vema, basically meaning little Vema. This name is spelled in Brahmi as Huvishka or Huvishka, and in Bactrian it is actually spelled as Uhueshka in some cases. And this also points to an element of aspiration or a ha in the onset of this name. The difference between the Bactrian spelling of Vema and Huvishka can be explained with the fact that the earlier Greco-Bactrian script before the time of Kanishka did not have a representation for h. A convention for that only arose later. So aspiration or h in the onset of Vhema could explain this third character that we see in the name. And aspiration is also attested in the second name, Taktu. Our hypothesis was that this unclear repeating character in the name may stand for h. And if we insert this here, we're left with one unknown character, which easily could be equivalent to m. And now, at this point, we can try to look at the diacritics, these little strokes added on the left side of characters. If we compare the spelling with the diacritics with spellings of the name in other languages, we see, first of all, that the single stroke can stand here for a in the other languages, but it also appears in places where no vowel follows the character. And then this sort of triangular thing or stroke at mid-height of the character corresponds to a or e in the other two languages, and the double stroke corresponds to a rounded vowel u or o. Extending this to the phrase King of Kings, we see three characters that don't have a diacritic stroke. In these cases, this corresponds to a in Bactrian and an etymological long a in Proto-Iranian. Whereas the character w with a double stroke corresponds to o in Bactrian, and the sequence is wa in Proto-Iranian. And then we have one case of the single stroke at the end of the word corresponding to Bactrian word final o and Proto-Iranian am. So from this data, we concluded that probably the absence of a diacritic stands for a long vowel a, or simply the vowel quality a, which we transcribe here with a with a macron. The single stroke for a short a, or perhaps simply the vowel quality of a central vowel. But it also appears to be used for the absence of a vowel. And so we transcribe this as a superscript a. The double stroke stands for a rounded vowel, probably u, and the triangular thing at mid-height, perhaps for e. And from this, we get the reading shau nana shau huema taktu. Now, we would expect, if this is really if what we identified as the phrase King of Kings, we would expect that we should find this also in the Dashti-Nawur inscription. And now that we know what to look for, we can actually identify it. It is not very clear on the stone, but since we know what it should look like, it is quite clear to see that it is there. And we even see these little strokes that appear between the words that appear in this inscription at regular intervals and seem to separate words and phrases. And they appear to separate the words here as well. And we would also expect to find the phrase, the dynastic name Kushan, directly after the royal name in the Dashti-Nawur inscription. And sure enough, there is a 3-character sequence here right after what we had identified as the name, separated by these word dividing strokes. And the first one has the vowel u, though we haven't met this character shape yet. The second one can easily be read as sha, and the third one na. So for the first character, we normally would have expected a k, the same as in the royal name. But in fact, what we see here is a sort of mirrored version of this. But if we think about the Middle Indo-Aryan spellings of the dynastic name as Gushana, we could imagine that this might stand for a voiced plosive g. And then in that way, we would have a dynastic name here as well. And now I will give over to Natalie.
Okay. I will not go into detail with the following slides due to the time limit, but here are some further passages of the Dashti-Nawur inscription that we believe to have deciphered that parallel the Bactrian version of the text. The Bactrian version being roughly of the King of Kings, the great salvation, Lematachtu, the Kushan, the righteous, the just, the God worthy of worship, who according to his own will has gained the kingship. And what we find in Dashti-Nawur is Buraka Sutura, which is great savior. Bar Nuka, with 2 signs being at this point illegible, God worthy of worship. Rashtaka, righteous. Shanu Bu Shaudanu, will, so this is still a little unclear, to the kingship. And finally, Kudu, the relative pronoun ku, with parallels, with a parallel udu that we have in the Алмосީ gorge inscription and also on a potsherd from Genghis Tepe. So as to the origin of the script, we believe that our decipherments support an imperial Aramaic origin for the unknown script, because there are no exclusive similarities with Kharoshthi, and where we do see differences, the unknown script is actually closer to Aramaic than to Kharoshthi, which you can see also in the tables. For example, the M that we have already seen today. So there is no reason to derive the unknown script from Kharoshthi rather than from Imperial Aramaic directly. And this would mean that Kharoshthi and the unknown script, and possibly Brahmi, likely result from similar adaptations of Aramaic in different regions. So the idea of vowel diacritics must have spread through cultural contexts, but not necessarily the exact form of these diacritics. So at this point, we have conducted an exhaustive analysis of the signs, and we successfully substituted plausible phonetic values. So what remains to be done, according to the method for decipherments devised by Michael Ventris, the decipherer of Linear B, along with John Chadwick, is to conduct a decisive check to ensure that the apparent results are not due to fantasy, coincidence, or circular reasoning. And we present to you a decisive check. An inscription of a name in Bactrian and Brahmi from a cave on an island in Yemen, which is somewhat surprising, but well, there it is. The Bactrian version reads the name Omoyago, and the Brahmi one Umiyaka, Sa being the genitive. And something that was up to this point believed to only be scratches turns out to be an instance of our unknown script with 4 signs. So this find at least supports our reading of 2 consonants, namely M and K. So M, K, the second one being M, the last one being K. And the first sign is preserved badly, but it reminds us of our sign for W that we see in the royal name. So from the other 2 languages, we expect something like H and maybe a rounded vowel. And next to the W on the right, you can actually see traces of another scratch. We suspect this to be a ligature of H and W, and we do see these kinds of ligatures, them just being closely written letters in Dashtina Wur. So this would be our hypothesis. And as to the third sign, we also have similar instances of it in Dashtina Wur, and from the other 2 languages we expect something like a Y, and we don't have that consonant yet in our sign inventory, so we would tentatively conclude that this is the consonant Y, yielding the name Huamuyaka. And finally, our conclusions. We believe that 15 characters in the Unknown Kushan script can now be read, which is around half of the corpus. The Unknown Kushan script is probably an alpha syllabary descended from Imperial Aramaic, so it is a sister but not a daughter of Kharoshthi. And at least at Dashtina Wur and the Almosī Gorge, it seems to represent a previously unknown Middle Iranian language. Tashakur, thank you for your attention. Спасибо за ваше внимание.
Спасибо, очень интересно.